In a world divided by oppression, one man stood tall and broken by chains, unshaken by fear. His name was Nelson Mandela, a warrior who fought not with weapons, but with courage, a prisoner who became a president, a leader who chose forgiveness over vengeance, and united a broken nation. Nelson Mandela, the father of a nation. Part 1. The early years. Child of the Thembu, the rolling hills of Mvezo, a small village in the Eastern Cape, where the first world young Rolihlahla Mandela ever knew. Born on July 18, 1918, he was the son of Gadla Henry Mfakanyiswa, a chief of the Thembu people. His mother, Nozakini Fanny, was a devout Christian, and though they lived simply, young Mandela was surrounded by the rich traditions of his people. His father was a proud man who refused to bow to the demands of white magistrates, a defiance that cost him his chieftaincy. Forced to leave Mvezo, the family resettled in the nearby village of Kunu. Here, Mandela spent his early years herding cattle, playing with other boys, and listening to the elders' stories of African resistance against colonial rule. But his childhood was shattered when his father died in 1927. The 9-year-old boy was sent to live with Chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo, the regent of the Thembu, in Makekazweni. It was here that Mandela would begin to understand the weight of leadership and the injustices of a world where black voices were silenced. A destiny foretold. Makekazweni was a place of order and tradition. As a ward of the regent, Mandela was raised alongside Jongintaba's own son, Justice, and treated as royalty. He attended a Methodist mission school, where a teacher gave him the name Nelson, a common practice for African children under colonial education. Mandela watched as Jongintaba settled disputes among his people, dispensing wisdom and fairness. But he also saw something in settling white magistrates overriding the chief's decisions. One day, after witnessing a British official dismiss Jongintaba's ruling, Mandela felt a spark of anger. Why should outsiders dictate our laws? At Clarkberry Institute, then Helltown, Mandela excelled in his studies. He was tall, athletic, and fiercely intelligent, but he also began questioning the colonial narratives taught in school. When he enrolled at Fort Hare University in 1939, he believed he was on the path to becoming a counselor to the Thembu king. But fate and his own rebellious spirit had other plans. The young scholar. Fort Hare was a place of awakening. Mandela studied English, anthropology, and law, but his real education came from his peers, young black intellectuals like Oliver Tambo, who would become a lifelong friend. When the university served poor quality food, Mandela and his classmates organized a protest. The rebellion led to his expulsion in 1940. Humiliated, he returned to Makekazweni, only to discover that Jongintaba had arranged marriages for both him and Justice. Faced with a future he did not choose, Mandela made a daring decision. He and Justice fled to Johannesburg, the city of gold, where the mine swallowed black laborers whole and apartheid's shadow loomed large. Johannesburg calling. Johannesburg in 1941 was a place of harsh contrasts, glittering wealth for whites, crushing poverty for blacks. Mandela found work as a night watchman at a mine, but his sharp mind soon caught the attention of Walter Sisulu, a real estate agent and ANC activist. Sisulu became his mentor, securing him a position as a law clerk at a Jewish firm, Witkin, Sadelsky and Eidelman. For the first time, Mandela saw black lawyers fighting apartheid in court. Inspired, he enrolled at the University of the Witwatersrand to study law. But Johannesburg also showed him apartheid's cruelty past laws, police brutality, and the daily humiliation of black South Africans. One evening, while walking home, he was stopped by a white policeman. "Kaffir, where's your pass?" The word Kaffir, racial slur, burned in his ears. That night, he vowed to fight back. Part 2. The awakening of a revolutionary. The law and the struggle. By 1943, Mandela was deeply involved in politics. He joined the African National Congress (ANC) and, alongside Walter Sisulu and Oliver Tambo, helped form the ANC Youth League, demanding a more militant approach against apartheid. In 1952, he and Tambo opened South Africa's first black-run law firm, Mandela and Tambo, in Johannesburg. Poor clients lined up outside their office, seeking help against unjust laws. One woman, arrested for not carrying her passbook, wept as she told Mandela how police had assaulted her. His hands clenched in anger. This must end. The ANC launched the Defiance campaign, urging blacks to break apartheid laws deliberately. Mandela traveled across the country, organizing protests, but the government struck back, arresting him under the Suppression of Communism Act. Though he avoided prison, he was banned from public speaking and confined to Johannesburg. The fight had only just begun. Apartheid's grip. In 1948, the National Party won the elections, formalizing apartheid into law. Mandela watched in horror as new policies segregated buses, hospitals, and even park benches. The government bulldozed black neighborhoods, forcing families into townships like Soweto. In 1955, the ANC and other anti-apartheid groups drafted the Freedom Charter, declaring, "South Africa belongs to all who live in it," but the government responded with violence. On December 5, 1956, Mandela was arrested in a nationwide raid. Charged with treason, he faced the death penalty. The treason trial dragged on for years, draining the ANC's resources. Yet Mandela stood firm in court, his voice unwavering. "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I cherish the ideal of a democratic and free society." In 1961, the trial ended not guilty, but the ANC was now banned. Mandela knew the time for peaceful protest was over. Part 3. The Underground and Imprisonment. Sharpeville Massacre, the turning point. March 21, 1960, was a day that shook South Africa to its core. In the township of Sharpeville, thousands of black protesters gathered outside a police station, demanding an end to the hated pass laws, a system that controlled where black South Africans could live and work. The police panicked. Without warning, they opened fire. 69 people were killed, most shot in the back as they fled. The images of bodies sprawled in the dust sent shockwaves across the world. Mandela, now a leading figure in the ANC, watched in horror. For years, he had believed in peaceful resistance, but Sharpeville changed everything. If the government would massacre unarmed protesters, how could dialogue work? In secret meetings, Mandela and his comrades made a fateful decision. Armed struggle was now necessary. The birth of Umkhonto we Sizwe. By 1961, Mandela had gone underground, disguising himself as a chauffeur, a gardener, even a chef, always one step ahead of the police. He traveled across Africa, training in guerrilla warfare in Ethiopia and Algeria. That December, he announced the formation of Umkhonto we Sizwe MK, Spear of the Nation. Their mission: sabotage government installations, not people. Power stations, railways, and communication lines became targets. Mandela knew the risks. "It is useless to preach peace when the government answers our demands with violence," he declared. But the state was closing in. Capture and the Rivonia trial. On August 5, 1962, after months on the run, Mandela was betrayed. Arrested near Howick, he was charged with inciting strikes and leaving the country illegally. At his trial, he refused to defend himself, instead delivering a speech that electrified the world. "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Sentenced to 5 years, he thought that was the end. But then, police raided an ANC hideout in Rivonia, uncovering plans for armed resistance. Mandela, though already imprisoned, was put on trial again, this time for treason, punishable by death. The Rivonia trial became an international spectacle. Mandela and his comrades stood firm, turning the courtroom into a platform for justice. On June 12, 1964, the verdict came: life imprisonment. As he was led away, he raised a fist. The struggle would continue. Robben Island, a prisoner for 6664. Robben Island was hell. Mandela spent 18 of his 27 prison years in a tiny, damp cell, breaking rocks in a limestone quarry under the blistering sun. The guards taunted him, denied him letters, and buried him in solitary confinement. But Mandela refused to be broken. He organized secret study groups, taught fellow prisoners, and even slowly won over some guards with his dignity. When officials offered early release in exchange for renouncing violence, he refused. Only free men can negotiate. A prisoner cannot enter into contracts. Meanwhile, outside, his name became a global rallying cry. Free Mandela, echoed from London to New York. Part 4. The Long Walk to Freedom. Secret Negotiations. By the 1980s, South Africa was burning. Mass protests, international sanctions, and guerrilla attacks had weakened the apartheid regime. Behind the scenes, the government knew they needed Mandela. In 1985, secret talks began. Mandela, now moved to a more comfortable prison, met with government officials. He negotiated not just for his own freedom, but for a democratic South Africa. The world watched in suspense. Release at last. On February 11, 1990, after 27 years, Nelson Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison, his fist raised in triumph. The streets of Cape Town erupted in celebration. In his first speech as a free man, he spoke not of revenge, but of reconciliation. "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I cherish the ideal of a democratic and free society." The impossible was now within reach. The road to democracy. The next 4 years were a whirlwind of negotiations, violence, and hope. Right-wing extremists spawned rallies, militant factions threatened civil war. But Mandela, now leading the ANC, held firm. In 1993, he and President F.W. de Klerk were awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. A year later, on April 27, 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections. Millions lined up for hours to vote. When the results came in, the outcome was clear. Nelson Mandela was now president. Part 5. Reconciliation and Legacy. The Presidency, Healing a Nation. Mandela's presidency was not about power, it was about unity. He invited his former jailers to his inauguration. He embraced rugby, a white-dominated sport, leading South Africa to World Cup victory in 1995. He established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where victims faced their tormentors not for vengeance, but for healing. And then, in 1999, he did the unthinkable. He stepped down after one term, proving that leadership was about service, not control. The final years and immortal legacy. In retirement, Mandela became a global elder, fighting AIDS and poverty. On December 5, 2013, the world mourned as he passed away at 95. But his spirit lived on. It always seems impossible until it's done. And he had done the impossible. The unfinished journey. Today, South Africa still grapples with inequality. But Mandela's dream endures, a reminder that justice, forgiveness, and courage can change the world. His long walk is over, but ours continues.